Hello.
Hey, Claudia.
It's it, Greg. Your mic is muted.
Cool. How's that?
Now I
Is that
can't.
better?
Yeah, I've never met Greg before, so we've spoken so many times.
I know, this is wild, isn't it?
Yes. So now I'm seeing you in fake real life. Little fake life.
Claudia, I love your background.
Well, I have I'm a Zoom professional. I mean, seriously, because that's all I do is Zoom, like endlessly. So I could do some nice things with Zoom, such as that. Right. Or then there's that. Now there's several of me. It's like double layered Zoom.
Nice.
Wait, I want to see what happens when I open the door. Because there's a Z channel. Oh, yeah. Right, it's all about depth. So when I open the space up a little more, it sort of screws up the camera. Woo. And then we have 3-channel Zoom. Which
Wow. Are these like add-ons for the package?
should I give your class a demo of Zoom live Zoom performance art? I think that's a good way to start. All right, because we could say this is a performance lecture. All right, so I've already taught everybody at the School of the Art Institute how to do this. So you have students, you have some people with a leg up on you already. I think it's already out there in the art world. So I'm going to show you how to do this, okay? Do you want me? I'm going to share screen. Oh, can I share a screen? Or can only the chat master?
No,
okay.
You can absolutely.
All right, okay. So, oh, but you have disabled it. Oh, wait a minute. I can't because Zoom has, as of yesterday, forbade the non-chat masters to share.
Oh, no. I did not realize that.
Because the students were so naughty.
Uh-oh.
And they were hijacking and doing all kinds of naughty things. So only the
I can make you a host, Claudia.
Oh.
So.
All right.
You are now the host.
I think I need to be a host anyway because I have to share, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's see if I can. It works now. Do you wanna? This will stop other screen sharing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so is this my, wait a minute, is it this? Wait, what happened to my control? Oh, my control is here. All right, so, I'm not sure. Is this my Zoom? Do you see is this my Zoom? Do you see my Zoom control here? No. I think I have to do this. Yeah. Is this my Zoom?
I see it.
All right. So what you do is you click, because I could also share my desktop, but that's more confusing. So if you go down to the bottom where the menu on the bottom is, next to the video icon, and you click on it, it will open up this. Right? You got it? Wow. There's a little caret to the right of the video icon at the menu on the bottom.
Oh, choose virtual background.
Yes. Okay. So they have, wait, I'm going to go back. I'm going to unclick my green screen. All right, so you have the ability to, this is like the wallpaper in my flower matrix world. These are actually augments that you would normally see on wallpaper. So anyway, you have their defaults, but if you click the little plus sign up there, right, add image or video, you can add a JPEG, which can't be that big. I think there's a size limit. I can't remember what, but probably 4 megabytes. And you can add an MP4 where there's also a size limit of 4 megabytes. So you have to bring it into, some kind of compression software and squeeze it to get it down. But anyway, so then what I do is, if you notice, on the bottom it says, I have a green screen. So if you turn that on, right, now it's on, but I'm gonna turn it off. So I'm gonna get this, excuse me, I have to get something in the oven. This is the secret. All right. Now, if you turn on, I have a green screen. You there's this little color swatch down there, right? And if you hit it, you get a little crosshair, and then let's say you click on your skin. But I don't want to click on my skin because it's a little too distracting. So I'm gonna click on the little color swatch again, and then I'm holding up a white napkin because I've decided that my alpha channel should be white. You could do it for black also or whatever. So now I have
So when it sees that color,
a hole in space, you see, because it's seeing white as an alpha channel, and that's why I'm wearing white. Or the open door, which actually goes down to my staircase. So if I remove this, and I remove, I say I want none. Where the hell is my virtual background? None. This is my actual space, right? And over here is a door into my attic studio, and that's a window. And there's depth. So the way this works is it reads Z depth. So I can goodbye, right? Hello. See, that's me also mapped onto that's in work I did as also an augment years ago, so you get that, right? If you come in front of the Z, you get that. And if you go behind the Z, it has a datum plane that it functions in. And if you use a JPEG, it has a more shallow one. So here's a JPEG. So you notice the JPEG, it has a deeper one. Goodbye. And now I'm half in infinity. Right? That's it. Pretty cool, right? So that's the story. Now I'm going to put on, what I did is, I forgot that. The story actually is, I started with the background. Then I added the green screen, right? The green screen, I now have to recolor sample. So I'm going to click this. And I'm going to click on the color coded thing. And then I'm going to click on that thing. So, whoa. It's faulted. Am I confusing it? Just right here. That's better. And it sees my specular highlights. That's why it's covering my glasses. Right? And then what I did is, I did a screen recording on Zoom. I Zoom recorded me, and I walked around, right? And then I loaded that up to use as a virtual background. So that's that one, right? There's a me behind me, which is the me I recorded, right? And when I keep the door open, it's more interesting because it gets even more confused because of the spatial dislocation, the Z channel confusion. And then this one I recorded for the third time, right? The me over me. So that's like 3 me's. It only works when you wear the same clothing. You know what I mean? You have to keep the set consistent. So where are your students not here?
I think everybody's here. We could start whenever you're ready, Claudia.
Why can't I see them? Yeah. Are they here?
I'm a student. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, I want to see you. Wait, I'm gonna put that one back. Wait, let me,
Is there a vacuum in the
I want to stop
background?
sharing. I want to stop sharing. Oh, I see you now. That's why I didn't see you. I'm gonna go
Did
to
you
gallery.
make this exhibition?
Yes,
You made that?
yes.
All right. I made this little video where I'm just walking around in it.
Oh, wow. You're from
So I
Pittsburgh.
went to Pittsburgh with Bonnie as part of a extracurricular trip. Actually, not with Bonnie, with some other people.
Oh yeah, that was a good show.
Hmm.
Yes, I did. So that's the wallpaper. See what's back there? That's the wallpaper in the show. That's the wallpaper.
Yep. Just me being goofy in there. Nice to know.
Yeah.
You're the creators of what I termed the archives, but that's kind of an
Oh well, I'm glad that I'm. Anyway, so that's the whole thing about the digital. We're in infinite archives. So let's start by talking. Do you want to start? I'm not going to go to. I'm going to go back to speaker view. There's too many people.
Yeah.
Hi.
Claudia, yeah, we're ready to start whenever you are. Greg, I don't know if you have any intro stuff you want to do.
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
The main thing for people to remember here is if you are an EMU student and you're interested in this for LBC credit, email me at gtom at emish.edu. Obviously, the general education office is a little bit slow right now, but we will do our best to get your LBC credits to you. When you do that, I'll need your EID number as well. So yeah, email me gtom at emish.edu, and yeah, Chris, if you want to give Claudia a little introduction, yeah, let's get this started.
Yeah, so thanks all for being here. I know we've got a bunch of students from Eastern Michigan University's Animation, Video, and Moving Image course, which is studying video and animation in the context of social media this term. So we're super excited to have Claudia Hart, who is a professor from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, here to talk with us about a student project that she's worked on and some of her own student work. So without getting too much into more introduction, Claudia.
A project with my students.
Yes, project with your students.
And also my own work. So I'll
Yes.
start by saying that one of the things that I have done from the beginning at the School of the Art Institute, I developed a program within the film video department called Experimental 3D. So that was one of the, I think it was actually the first set of curriculum that was direct using VR of all kinds. At that point, it was basically just 3D animation in an art context. So I developed different forms of pedagogy. I had all these classes that were based on studio practice instead of industry pipeline. And and so I developed a style of teaching that totally blew up industry pipeline models and were based on real world artistic practices. And I grouped together skill sets in a different way. So that also led me to having my relationship to teaching was one of research. In other words, I started teaching there 13 years ago. There were really just about no artists, let's say, working even with 3D animation in an art world context. So I would make up a class, such as the one where I gave you the chapter to read, virtual installation, having no real feeling where I propose what virtual installation in my imagination might be. At that point, you didn't see people working artistically with any of this medium. So I would say to my students, this is research. I'm giving you a cluster of skills in which we simulate studio practice, right? Because 3D animation and augmented reality and virtual reality is what you call simulations technologies. In other words, they're phenomenological. They simulate physical qualities in the real world. And I assume that everybody here in your animation class has done 3D and knows what I'm talking about, right? Is this correct, Chris? Chris, you're muted.
Not all of us have done 3D, so we're focusing more on 2D, but I think they should
They have an idea.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that's super foreign.
All right. So the physics simulations and simulations of light and simulations of the real world are the basis of these kind of technologies that I do. So with that in mind, I would say here's a cluster of things. I don't know what art would be if it was with this group of skills. You have to make it up. So starting that, my students have gone on and become sort of figures in the art world. They are pioneers in this area, and they show all over the place, and it became a community. It's a scene. It's a lot of, which is true, right, Chris? It actually happened. They went boom. And we all went boom and developed a kind of practice. This really is true. So every time I would make a class, it was unusual in that it was a proposition for a medium, and it was also a kind of collaborative practice in which I taught my practice. And the projects were artistic projects where we did it as research, like researchers might be in science or academia. We were developing new structures and new ways of doing things. So virtual installation was one of those things. When I first started virtual, so it's very hard for me, Chris, to actually separate my practice and my pedagogic practice. I do some curating and some writing. In fact, right now I'm doing organizing a show for my gallery in New York, which is called Bitforms, which is an online show, which is supposed to be on Artsy. Which is actually an essay with images. So I do all of that because when I started, there was nobody doing what I did. I was very isolated and mostly got treated very not nicely by my peers. I'm about to be 65, so I want you to understand that I'm extremely early in this area, and mostly people were mean to me. I thought they were going to give me a gold star and a crown on my head for discovering that photography was now irrelevant and that video was irrelevant. But no, they were just hostile. So what that meant was that I spent a lot of time developing language, writing, curating, developing language around things, and the pedagogy was a big part of it, and developing things with my students who went out and did things like start galleries or themselves become artists or curators or writers and very active because the classes stimulated them that we could self-organize. That's part of my thing. So virtual installation, when I started teaching it, was, oh no, is that mine? I'm rendering on the other computer. So, did it crash? Or is that your computer?
I don't think it was me.
No. All right, well anyway, I won't go check it now. But so when I first started what I called virtual installation, it was 3D integrated into photography. And you had to sort of do it by measuring, you had to do it by faking the real camera, doing it mathematically essentially, where you would find out all of the qualities of the lens and you would put it into the virtual camera and you would eyeball match it. Then there was softwares which allowed you to actually match the 2D, that measured pixel flat surfaces in terms of Z depth based on color grading. And so I started thinking virtual installation might be 3D integrated into video or cinema, still on the photographic thing. And then augmented reality came along, and I decided that was virtual installation, because augmented reality is a mapping of an animation, right, a simulation, and integrating it into the real. You look through your app, right, which is sitting on your camera of your smart device, and the app is a filter, basically, that maps whatever you're looking at, or based on geolocation, overlays some kind of image, animation, or effect. So that to me became the more interesting way of viewing it, because I was very interested in the idea that people would run around in a real world space looking at their cameras at something no one else could see. That was one thing that was really interesting to me. And also the integration of the artificial with the real. So we went, and I want to go to the website now, all right, of the what I called the romantic app, all right, because then you can stop looking at me and start looking at like what that is. So here, this is the first one. So wait, I have to share screen. So, okay. You see it? Oh no, I didn't share it yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Sorry. Okay.
Got it.
So, but I'm just gonna scroll a little, because I think there's a pretty good picture in here. Oh no, it's not. It's in, I wanna go, actually I think I have the book chapter here. Oh yeah, here. So I'm gonna stop the share and share again and go to this thing. Okay. So this is the book chapter that was just published. So let's see if I can find it. These are a book that's just coming out, actually, where I wrote about the romantic. Doing just what I say that my life is about, is trying to create a context for this stuff within a larger art world context. Let's see if I can find the pic I'm looking for. No, I'm scrolling too fast. So I was trained as an art historian. And I have a degree in both architecture, the history of architecture. I went to Columbia University. And then as an undergraduate, I got a degree in straight up art history. And I'm still looking for the picture I want. But these are all let's see if I can find it. No. Oh, there it is. All right. I discovered 3D by accident, basically. I had a history background and I was showing work from the late 80s. And I was the generation that was called intermedia. So what that meant at that time was that I worked with Super 8 movies, photos, I was a painter, I made objects. So when I actually first discovered 3D was that I was living in Berlin. I was active as an artist. I was also an editor at Art Forum. So because I was trained as an art historian, I was always writing. And so when I happened to be living in Berlin, my husband's actually Austrian, and I lived there for about 7 years, and somebody gave me some free tickets to the Berlinale, the film festival, and I was given a free ticket to Toy Story 1. It was 1990. No, wait a minute. Yeah, it was about 1995. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, I was not somebody who had, my mother didn't let me watch TV, let me put it that way. I had no familiarity with cartoons. So when I looked at Toy Story 1, I did not see animation. I saw Renaissance painting, right? In fact, now it makes me want to stop screen and share again and go to my here. And now I'm going to show you this. I'm going to surf a lot, so you got that one now? Are you seeing that?
Yep.
All right, so I went to see that, and what I saw was this. It looked like Renaissance painting to me. I was very fascinated by this hybridization of a kind of super realism and a mathematical perspective, that it looked somehow photographic, but at the same time mathematical. I was really struck by that, and I felt like it was like it was 1994 when that premiered. And I felt at that point like a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, wow, this is next. I mean, there was a lot of excitement about Toy Story 1 because of the technology, but it was also the way it looked. So I felt that this was a mixing of the old world order of perspective and the medium world order of photography, and it would come up with something new, which is Toy Story 1. So that was the insight that made me excited. And now we go back to here. Oh wait. So where are we again? Yeah. So we at the Art Institute, part of the Art Institute is a museum across the street, and it's a history museum. And I had the idea, as a result of all these different strains of my background, that I wanted to do something in the museum and use them as trackables. So I was thinking that this was in terms of doing something that might be with imagining virtual installation as a hybrid of the fake world, the simulated world, which you see through your phone, and elements in the real world. And I had this sense that the place to do this was across the street. And because I had this training and background in art history, I did understand that the Impressionism, that museum is famous for its Impressionism collection, was the site of a lot of change. Impressionism marked the beginning of the industrial age, just the way we, at the beginning, the entry to the digital age, are marking it with media art. So I did understand that my students and I, stood at the gateway to a digital age, the way the Impressionists stood at the gateway of the modern age. And they were impacted by photography and if you know anything about Impressionism, the way they cropped pictures, it was a slice of light, their way of looking at flattening of things were highly, the way that it was reality was thought of as the way light reflected off of things, was a reflection of ideas about photography, which was thought of as the biggest, the most important giant change in representation, and it was, right? This was all true. And so I said to my students, all right, we're standing at the gateway of the digital age. I want you to do augments that respond to these paintings as they stood at the gateway of the age of photography and the industrial age. I was introduced to the director of the museum, the old museum, whose name is Gloria Groom. And she is a very forward-thinking, theatrical, sort of wild character. And my dean introduced us thinking we would get along, and we did. And as a result, I worked with her and her staff over a course of about 5 years already, augmenting this stuff. And one of the things that happened through that process, which was why I wanted to show you the picture of the people in the museum, when we looked at this, which I'm going to stop share. I have to keep doing this. I should be getting better at it by now. Yeah, here. Right, here was my class and I giving the tour of the museum for the first act, which we did 5 years ago. And we had at that point the board of the school and oops, what did I do with it? And all that. But what struck me at that point was it wasn't just, this is about social media, right? It wasn't just that you overlaid an animation on top of a painting, but that you did it in a public space with a free app that anybody could get, that you looked at it through your phone, which was your personal device closest to your heart, and you did it with a group. And you walked through the museum holding up your tablets or your phones and looking at stuff, and this would activate the public also in a crazy way. People would start running around like maniacs and say, "What are you doing? What are you looking at? Can we see too?" It activated community. It functioned. I mean, that's why Chris said, "Have I done anything on social media specifically?" I do a lot of shows on the internet, but that doesn't mean I'm, working with it in the same way you all are doing for distribution only on the internet. I'm not a GIF artist. But this process of augmented reality within a public space struck me as being the closest thing that I have done that has to do with social practice and public practice and the way social media changes things. So we made a little booklet. We made websites. So now I want to just click through a few of the projects. Now I'm going back. So this one is with the Monet paintings. He did a number of them, Jared Solomon, and what he did was he found a software that actually is based on chroma connections. It's just one of these free, are we on the right thing now? Am I on?
I think we're missing your screen still.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So here. Is this the right thing? Oh no, here it is. I'm sorry. Here. Okay, see it? Is it shared?
Yep.
Okay, good. So here, he found a shareware, a software, like a little app that's available that was based for free on the internet, and which actually made connections between color relationships. So it would search. It was just some kind of little app that somebody made for God knows what, but he thought of it as a wonderful way of playing with ideas about curating, like how curators make their decisions, what goes near one thing. But it also is very uncanny and very seductive. So what it actually does is it finds relationships between paintings or things that are hanging next to each other. He did quite a few of these. I think there's some down here too, but I'm just going to go through as we go. I'll show you a few of them. Now, what seemed wonderful to me also was not just that the way people would respond to us and how it made community and discussion. I did one of these also at the MCA with another show, the Riot Girls. It was a more contemporary abstract painting show. And what the Art Institute also found is people got excited because it made it more contemporary and relevant to their lives. The Art Institute, the Museum of Contemporary Art, where I also did such a project, actually has a museologist, meaning they study the way people use their museum. And she had her team question people. We would have the app out there and all the students had it open and we would demo it to people in the museum. And they were interested because abstract paintings are notoriously uninteresting to the general public. They hate them. and my students did with the Riot Girls, more abstract, but very pop and very formal pop, glitchy, wild things. And they would stand around looking or demo them, and even very old people who were there in the afternoon, just retired people who would stroll around the museum, would say, "Wow, that's great." And the art MCA museologists had questionnaires for the visitors and say, "What did you like it?" "Yes, I loved it." "Why?" "Because it made it more like my life. It made it seem more like things that I can relate to, that I understand from the real world now." So in these historic ones too, here this was for a Monet painting, and she cooked her own fish and sort of integrated it with the Monet painting. Here's one with a Rodin where you looked at the big Rodin sculpture and you saw comes up, comes down. And I thought that was really clever. Here was one where she was more thinking in terms of the content of the painting, which was about war. So she was making a more violent and contemporary version of a 19th century academic painting. Also worked really well. Here was a young man who went online and looked for gaming elements, like free green screen animals that came from games. And then he was interested in the way 19th century painting did look like game environments. And in fact, that's because, game designers basically look at that stuff. Romantic painting has had a giant impact on game design because it's all about the end of the world, or it's about apocalyptic events. And they all look at Caspar David Friedrich and 19th century painters a lot. And so the aesthetic actually went, and he downloaded like games that people had shared from, animals that people shared from games, and just put them in there, and it looked like perfect. I thought that was also very clever. And then these are still images. Let me click through. Again, there's somebody. This was also one that I liked, this particular one, because this was from an early 3D software that was meant for gaming called, as a game, it was called Bryce. And you could make your own landscape and print it out and put it on your wall. And it was also all based on 19th century and impressionistic styles of painting. And Bryce was like a cheap shareware that was a game. It came directly out of impressionist painting, and he like went in and sort of copied using Bryce, which is I don't even think existing anymore. It was pretty much out the door at that point. And made a fake impressionist painting matching the one underneath. That was cute too. There, he also did chickens. Severio, those were like game chickens, and they were clucking around. This one I also loved, which was a real naked girl masked on and the fluttering. So they were very much here. Also was every ad. In Seurat, who's the perfect gateway artist, impressionist, scientific, trying to having the impact of science on and early technologies on his style. He this student found every ad ever made using Seurat that was actually in the archives of the museum and made a kind of a show out of them so you could see them. This one was me. Oh, I think I have some movies in here. Yeah, that was what I was using as a background. So this was like me mapped onto my 3D modeled head of Medusa, which was also. So when you looked at the sculpture, you saw my face on my model bobbing around in there. I'm going to go to the other one, the next one. This is Romantic Act 2. So here you can see this kid went crazy and did millions of things. Here we have movies. So this was 3D soup cans floating around. He added all that. That was the same painting Severio used. Same one. He became an augmented artist. Let's see. Where he has mythologies, he made up all these mythologies that had to do with the ghosts of 19th century workers who lost their jobs due to the rebuilding of Paris in the 19th century, sort of like what's happening now. Here was also a sculpture flattened of this, so you saw it floating around as layers in front. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that was the experience through the app. Let's see what else. Here you got to choose your color changing. You click on it and like choose your own color. Let's see what. Oh, these were great too. From a Black student who was rethinking all these. Well, this one was fantastic. This is The Captured Slave. It's a 19th century painting. And he took the John Singer Sargent painting of this aristocratic white woman and sort of looming over him. So it's very politicized. Here were ones that were more about glitching, that this was a contemporary version of what the Impressionists did. So I think all of these for me are interesting because particularly now, when we're in this crisis, it's, I think, very meaningful to look back and have a bigger worldview, because I think what's happened with COVID is it's speeded up all the changes that would happen anyway. Here we all are, right? I'm developing a program now that's going to be for a virtual department that will be all online teaching. It's called the School of Hyper Realities. and it will be all online. I think, we'll see a lot of structures collapse and new ones replace them. A lot of people are going to suffer. But I think what's happened is it's the time where we sort of want to look at things with a bigger picture and look back at history and look what's happened in other times when there have been these enormous crises and changeovers. So to me, it's also particularly meaningful, actually, to look this particular project now for students to think of technology, because the geeks will now rule the world post-COVID. I mean, that's obvious, right? But to have a bigger picture of how these changes fit into a larger worldview. So I feel like looking at this across time and history and the impact of technologies. Let's see if this one. There was a couple on here that I would like. This is a romantic one. It seems like an appropriate time. Chris, do you think that this is related to the kinds of things they're studying?
Yeah, for sure. And
You
I
want to
think,
respond?
yeah, definitely. All semester we've been talking about kind of genres and practices that are happening with video and animation and audio on different social media platforms. So
And what does that mean? Yeah.
Well, sure. So we basically started off in the term, each student gave a presentation on some sort of social media genre, and they were, defining that kind of however they felt fit.
Yeah.
And so we have since been using the content that was gathered. So basically, like, every student made a little research archive. We've then been using that content to make remixed audio and video artworks. And currently we are working on animation projects that are kind of interpreting some of the themes that come into, dealing with media on sort of through social media or other mediation. So things like surveillance, things like leisure, things like connection. So we're both kind of like participating a little bit in some of the practices, and also like examining them for creative, mining them for creative potential.
Well, I think one of the things about mining, right?
Yeah.
Mining is the key. So we live in a land of images and digital images and super saturated, mediated culture. And so we're mixing everything and moshing everything and collapsing histories, collapsing the past into the present. I think that's something that sort of happens, but I hope that it's possible also to learn from the histories and not just to level them.
Definitely.
One of the things that happens is that students just grab things off the internet randomly. And I think things gain their meaning. Where we are now and the problems we have is we haven't learned from history very well. So a lot of the disasters that are happening and the ahistorical view and the refusal, don't acknowledge climate change, let's pretend this and this isn't happening, is like media manipulation and all of that. I think like this is the moment to start to think one might want to know how these things fit into a bigger picture and how these things have happened before in cultures. I like hers.
I love this Apple one.
Yeah, she's great. I like them because they look somewhere in between a one of those TV ads for those cheap ads about products, and it made you understand how still lives had evolved into those like selling ads on TV showing you how to. Well, actually, like still lives have evolved into advertising, right?
Absolutely.
Hypermateriality. She's great. She's now going to Columbia, in fact, getting her MFA. I didn't think she'd get in. She did. On the basis of these. They're great. I love them because they do bring together the past and the completely. This one's more traditional, but I love this one. Wait, let's see. Also looks like one of the right. It's called Pour Latour. That's the name of the. Do any students want to comment? Can I have students' response? Can you make them respond? I make mine respond.
Yeah, so I would love some responses, and for
I would
those
like, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
y'all can shout it out. Otherwise, you can also, if you click the participants tab, you can raise your hand if you
I'm
are
gonna
a more
stop.
orderly person.
I want to hear some response before I go on to me. I force my students to speak. That's it. Come on. Franny.
Hey Claudia, my name's Franny.
Hi.
So I was wondering, is there any specific like augmented reality software or like apps to begin creating content and experiment with this like new form of media, or is it just kind of something that you just start fiddling around with the basic programs like Photoshop and stuff, or is there like?
Wait, I can specifically tell you that because it's also meaningful in terms of contemporary technology. I started doing augmented like 6 years ago, and every platform that I've ever worked on collapses. So these things are anything that's virtual. The development is within simulations, right? Cultures. So, for example, I started on one, it went broke, then I switched to Layar. Wait, Janaya was the first one. Then I switched to Layar. When I first did it, I didn't really have a sense of how much these would collapse so easily. Then we switched to Layar, and I made the school buy Layar, and I thought that because it's a cloud-based one, so there are two ways you can go. You either use Unity plus Vuforia, and you make a self-contained app that sits on your. It's a little piece of software, and then but the only way people can access it is if it's distributed either by the Apple Store or if it's PC and Droid, you can self-distribute, right? You can have a website, you can put it on the Google Play. Well, once you want to make something and it's in the corporate world, guess what? Apple does not give licenses to little small fry, right? They just will randomly say yes or no, and usually they say no if you're a little small fry. So also what I therefore realized, so when I make an app for collectors, right, my own stuff, I make a Droid app and it's available to them through a fancy tablet, which they buy, like a Namjoon Pike, you get a software and a piece of hardware. If I'm doing an app in a public place and I want everyone to use it, what I use are these public cloud-based apps. And Layar was the last one that everyone used. When I went to school last spring, I clicked on Layar and it didn't exist. It had gone hostile takeover, and it was just down, and that was that. So I was like, oh my God. So I went to Snapchat. Snapchat was great, and they were the ones that developed all these masks, right? And so I had a lot of students working with live performance with masks, just the way everyone's going to do Zoom now. And basically, the problem with that one is that the apps stay up for, you put it out there, someone has to click on it, and it's up for 2 weeks, and then it's deleted. So what I realized is the intervention are the asset. And when you make something with contemporary media, it's all about your assets, not the system of distribution. Everything, like 2 years ago, Mental Ray, which was the Maya renderer, but Intel that owned it went into what's it called, the cybercat, what's it called again, cryptocurrencies, which of course now are totally bankrupt due to COVID. This is like the reality you're in. And so, but Intel said, we make so much money with cryptocurrencies, we don't want to do Mental Ray. So they liquidated Mental Ray. And so again, that was 2 years ago. I came in and there was no renderer, but they bought Arnold. And Arnold is half made. So it's like building the airplane while you're driving it or flying it. And, trying to explain that also to students. It's an important lesson to learn. Because basically we're in this fluid world, which the COVID crisis has speed up totally. Right? I mean, everything you could imagine before, it's not going to go back. Right? It's what was going to be warped, but sped up 10 times over. My school, for example, had to take 3 weeks off. They couldn't even go on teaching online because the older teachers couldn't figure out how to use Zoom, which might seem funny to you.
We had a couple professors that had a rough time, but they figured it out after a while.
Yeah, like 3 weeks
It
later.
was a learning curve for everyone.
Yeah, right. Except not really. You know what I mean? It's like, no, not really. I was holding classes from the first week when my students really needed it because they were very scared. But going back to what you're saying, then Blip came back and I had them buy a Blip license. And Blip is again a cloud distributed software. What's good about it is anyone can upload the generic app. And it comes with a very dopey software, like anyone can do it. It's drag and drop. And what it can basically do is MP4s and GIFs. So the challenge is how creative you can be with masking, such as what I have, here, in my thing over here, right? What I was showing you is all about masking, right? The virtual background. So did I just change it? Yeah, right, that's masking. Oh, you have a nice pink picture. So anyway, what that does when you use layer is that you have to be clever with masking. That's how I knew how to be clever with Zoom, because I'm I'm an augmented artist. So it's all about compression and masking and how clever you could be. You can make these very complicated things. But it's more about content and understanding the meaning and not just making a cute one-liner. You give it some depth and understand what it's about, and then glitch the software. Basically, that's all you do. That's why, forget about tutorials, kids. I don't let mine use tutorials. They could use them, but I'm not helping them with that. You know what I mean? Because I want you all to approach this stuff in a fluid manner. But I think you're doing that, Chris, from what you described.
We're trying to, it's always trying to strike a balance, right? Because it's like don't necessarily always want to completely throw folks in the deep end, but at the same time, you want to, like you're saying, encourage exploration and not sort of lock people into this idea that there's one right way to do things, which is because, especially with media art, like you're saying, the way that you might be learning how to do something could very well be obsolete next year or next week or
Or
very
like
soon.
it's every 6 months.
Yeah, but that said, so Franny, I put a couple of the links to the platforms that Claudia is talking about. Vuforia is one that I've used, and it's pretty great. It does have
making self-contained apps.
Yeah, right. It does have some certain limitations, but we can totally talk about that more if you want to look into that.
But what I would say is, like, it's actually better to just start by using something that's easy, like Vuforia.
Yeah.
I mean, like what I'm saying is now Blip, right? It's called Blip AR. And like, for example, the Art Institute bought 500,000 clicks. I don't know why, because it's so cheap. I personally bought 50,000 clicks for 1 year. It's a 1 year license, and 50,000 clicks cost $500. So that's plenty for a class to fool around with, and you don't need 500,000. And so what I found is that it's actually harder to do something interesting than to run the software. And it's better to figure out how to do something interesting before you go through. Coding Vuforia is actually not very hard, but it's a little harder. It takes my students a whole semester to figure out how to do something interesting with Augmented. And that's with drag and drop software. Because no matter what you do, the artistry is in the concept of alpha channels, let's just say, right? The concept of manipulating the nothing.
Claudia, I think it looks like we got a couple other questions. I'm not sure who's first in line, but I'm just going to go alphabetical. So Anne, what's up?
I'm back on the group thing.
Okay.
Hi, Anne.
Hi. So I teach high school students photography. I just wonder, if I had students who are interested, like, what would be a good path for them? What kind of, would it be like math and programming or more an art path? I mean, what kind of things should they be looking to do?
You mean if they want to go into the world that I'm in?
Yeah. Like skills.
Skills would be, everything that you mentioned.
Yeah, everything.
All of the above. In other words, if you just code, because coding is too rational, the people who are coders have problems inventing things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to be able to understand that you have to hack everything anyway. For example, in industry, how do you think they do this stuff? You think that there's like a tutorial? Right, no, there isn't. There was no mouse hair before there was Stuart Little. I mean, then Maya made hair. But how did there get to be mouse hair? It was like a bunch of people like me who were just like, let's just do whatever, And then it's like, oh, that looks sort of like mouse hair. Or, the other guy says, what if we do that to it? So it's like, basically, hi Brody, you're waving too. And, you have to do both. You have to feel comfortable enough with math. I mean, I was a regular artist, but I'm lying when I tell you that I was a regular artist because, I basically was a mathematically talented and chose not to go to computer school for graduate school because the men were too nerdy.
I hear you.
Especially then, in the 70s. It was like,
Right.
And I didn't want to be the only girl.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I didn't do it, but I'm like not a normal, like, oh, I just started using Maya when I was 38, right? But
Yeah.
so I was loose enough that I could do it. So
Mhm.
kids who are just doing a little coding and a little art classing and you know what I mean, little everything, and they spend their life fooling around with on the internet, they're gonna be fine when they go to school. Enough math so that they're not like, ah!
I hear you. Yeah, like me. That's how I'd be. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's too alien.
Right.
So, but my students aren't necessarily math whizzes. They've just been doing it since they were young.
Mhm.
I mean, like 4. You know what I mean? Or 6. So it's not like they're naturally talented at it, but they're comfortable. Right, Chris? I mean, they're relaxed enough. It's all about hacking it, right?
For sure. Yeah, right. So I think part of it is sort of like instilling that attitude that there might not always be a right way to do things. And specifically creative fields, that's your charge, is like to figure out the wrong way to do the thing, or the non-standard way. But on a practical level, like I really wish I had some pretty intense like math and science classes going through high school. And I really wish that had been connected to like visual and creative things, because
Right.
it wasn't until way later that for me, I'm like, oh, like this, I actually need trigonometry now because I need to code this thing. And thank God I paid attention enough to cobble it together now. But like if I had known back then, like that those things were, so close to one another.
You know what the best thing is? 3D.
Yeah.
3D is simulations.
Yeah.
So actually, 3D uses all of the sciences in its various interfaces.
Yep.
It uses all the scientists, all the science is from biology to, I could show you that.
Yeah.
Let's go back to, I want to show you, let's go, I'm going back. Well, Brody, you kept wanting to say something. Brody.
Sorry, hang on a sec, because we got one more person ahead of Brody, so we'll get to let's.
And then I'll show you
let's,
pictures again because
perfect.
I actually can show you Maya.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go to Bob and then Brody.
All right. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Claudia, and everybody. So I was wondering if you were so far ahead of this trend towards like this cultural trend, and I was wondering, you seem to have an idea of where it's going, talking about how it's being accelerated right now by everybody working and living virtually. And so I was wondering if you had an idea kind of where it's going, how it's going to be co-opted by advertising and marketing. And then...
But it already has been.
Well, yeah, we're starting to see it more and more. And I guess
you're talking about a VR specifically?
Yeah, VR and AR. We're getting more.
Well, there will be no VR. It's just AR.
Yeah.
Okay. So AR will be, it's already that because it's interface design. So in fact, Graham showed that project that I did, which was this augmented room. Mm-hmm. And I was invited, that's at Carnegie Mellon, and it's a research facility, and the interface designers were really interested. And then I was invited to Brown, I was invited to various other Ivy League schools to talk to the interface designers. Because that's what they're doing. So interface design will be AR. You'll wear lightweight glasses, and you will see, things spatialized. You'll walk around and pick them up and make relations things mixed into the real world. And it'll be wireless. It already is. It's already out there. It's just too expensive now. But so there'll be, and then it will go, so you will have maybe a little pin and it'll be the wireless, right? And and it'll hook you into the cloud, and you'll see things that are streamed to you, or your computer will be over there and it'll be wirelessly connected, and it'll be your interface, but it'll also be your TV, and we'll see you as a cloud thing. And I think, in a world with viruses, people will be indoors a lot. I mean, I don't think this is just a little glitch. This is just the beginning. And I think these things will come and go in waves. You know what I mean? And you'll be in your space and you'll see a point cloud. Well, and that'll be life.
Now, so just a follow-up is
Houseplant business will blow up.
virtual.
Wine companies, houseplants.
You don't have to take care of the augmented reality plants.
Yeah, right. No, real ones. You want to have real ones.
Yes. So my follow-up would be, you're talking about hacking the tools that are out there, and I'm wondering, with more, are you excited about the availability of things like VR headsets, or is that type of
The headsets really irritate me. I mean, I've been doing works that are both let's say a 3D animated environment with headsets or augmented elements and XR, mixed realities. And what I found, to me, that was interesting about the work, I mean, the headsets are really irritating, and post-COVID, nobody's going to put on a headset unless it's your own, right? So the idea that you would have a headset in a public space is sort of like never going to happen again. But aside from that, what I found interesting about it was that when you experience with your body in a space elements, like when the people hold up their phones and they see my animations that appear in the VR world, I mean, I'll show you those projects, right? And there's a confusion between the liminal space, the halfway space, the mediated space, and the physical space, things that blur that boundary. What happens is that I found so interesting is that people go into a kind of heightened consciousness, like ecstasy almost. This, like the experience of the mixed reality, puts people into, it does something to your consciousness. That's the good part. And I see that happen over and over with people. I mean, they all think VR is magical, but what really makes people, they go around stroking each other and doing, like, behaving in different ways. When there is this, like, you know what I'm saying, the mixture where the borderline. And that's why even with the augmented in the museum, I saw that from the beginning. You know what I mean? Like, we would stand there, you didn't have to ask anyone. Like, you just stand there and you look through the phone, especially, and people would start running around, the regular people in the museum, saying, what's that? Like, this, and just like dancing for joy. They go nuts. So there's something about that sort of merging of the two that puts you into a kind of trance hypnotic state, actually. And I don't know if that will go away once we're used to it. But obviously, in this world, as what we've just been experiencing, you're right that this is extremely relevant to the way people will live.
So I want to get to Brody's question, which I think is a really good one. So he wrote in the text, what if you have a good idea, but you're not skilled enough to make it as you want it to be?
Change your idea. You think I'm kidding?
I'm just watching Brody's face in response to that.
Well, I mean, I have students. I have a student now. She's very bright. She went to Princeton and studied some academic thing. she's almost incapable of learning, Brody. Why? Because she wants to do that one thing, which she doesn't have the skills to do. So you know what she does? Nothing. So in the end, you have to be fluid. Digitality is about a kind of fluidity, and you have to be fluid. So you have to be, the whole workaround is how you can sort of do or get the feeling of the thing you want to do, or evoke the feeling you wanted it to evoke, but do it in another way. And then you have to think out of the left side of your brain. And then in doing that, you'll do these other things and you'll get gooder. You'll be gooder. And then later you'll do that other thing which you probably won't even want to do anymore. You'll want to do some other thing.
What if it's like something we really love and like we've been trying practice really hard and just wanting to try and do what we are best.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like change your idea. Mutate your idea. You know what I mean? Mutate it.
Like comics and
Well, you can do all kinds of creative things, but not in the way you thought you were going to do them.
Okay.
You have to think out of the left side of your brain. Like you have to ask yourself, what did I really want to do? Right? My student was like, well, I want this figure to get up and run back there. And I was like, well, character animation. How about if you just learn some other stuff and in 2 years you can do that, right? But do something else. Well, if you can't make the character run behind, why do you want the character to get up and run? You have to ask yourself.
Like one, you could just say you just want to show him that he's moving from point A to point B.
Or you want to show that there's some kind of life that's happening in a dead painting, right? You want to make a dead fixed object look like it's alive. That's really why she wanted to do it. So then you say, oh, that's really why I wanted to do it. So what's another way I can make that thing look alive? You have to get down to the core.
What if we don't know how?
Well, maybe you want to tell a story. So what if you tell the story as an audio track and do a series of still images? It's essentially a storyboard.
All right.
Right? You have to come at it from the other direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Because then you don't learn otherwise. Anyone else?
I think we can go ahead and
Look
transition
at some
to
other stuff?
talking about your work, Claudia.
All right. So, let's go. Wait, I have to share again. So let me share this. I mean, I chose things to show you exactly dealing with some of the things that were in that app. So let's see. Okay. So here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. This is like things I'm doing right now. But I want to just go down, because this was, I also showed things that influenced me. But I also have in here how I really started, which was, like that was me to start. But I want to show you, in here I have the Maya interface. So, am I sharing?
Yeah.
All right, so basically Maya has major menus that simulate different aspects of the physical world. They simulate on the level of modeling. It's mathematical principles of geometry, trigonometry, calculus. It's topological. It's about I misspelled mapping, pattern making. Right, that's one level of the object, how it exists in space. Yes, Chris, that's trigonometry and it's calculus and it's all that stuff. And then here, the rendering interface is based on the study of light, mechanics of cameras, lenses, construction of perspective. All of the interfaces use language that come from these sciences. There's not like every word that seems very bizarre actually comes from these various sciences, and the numbers you put in are actual data, real data that correspond to real physical processes and real physical qualities in the real world. So let's see. Then there's the one that has to do with gases, Newtonian physics, material science, physics, chemistry. That's why it's a good way. Somebody asked Anne about your high school kids. Good, Bonnie. Is Anne still there? Or she has her audio. And this is actually an epistemological software that actually is all sciences as various interfaces, right?
Right.
So it's a great way to teach kids science. And then obviously this one, which is also the physics of human and animal anatomy, morphology of the human body, and all of the language and all of the information is accurate. So you simulate the real world. So this idea that I was making a parallel construction to the real world in which I could do things that were sort of real, but also sort of disrupting the real. Oh, wait, maybe I do want to do this. Oh no, I'm in the wrong one. I have to go back to mine. Right here. What is it, Claudia Hart? Dash influencers. Okay, so that insight that I was working with something that was totally bound to physical processes in the real world, and at the same time I could do things that were very unreal with it. Like I was talking about why interface designers weren't interested in my process. And I realized that when I combined both, I could hypnotize people and put them into a kind of altered trance state. And a lot of what I do has to do with those things. I'm both merging, so I use things that have to do with, and so I'll just show you, all right? My work is very hypnotic because it takes actually the physics of perception and alters them and randomizes them and does strange, unnatural things to them with them. And as a result, people sort of go into another consciousness. So I did a piece called The Dolls, and so it was based on the idea of the collapse of empires. And so I took all of these logos from corporations and the symbols of heraldry from collapsed empires, and I brought them together. And I had dancers where I used motion tracking, and I tracked them, and I created these sort of strobing, transiting images. So I'm going to show you what this ends up looking like. All right, you can see it a little, and what I mean. how some of what I was talking about, it has all the references to history. We want that. All right. I'm not going to show you all of it, just a little bit. Welcome. No. 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 Eight. Eight. I'm going to skip ahead. It speeds up. Welcome. about that. So that was about trying to make mathematical randomness, which is sort of impossible. So I realized that I was making patterns from all of the different collapsed empires in time and space, and I made a kind of trompe-l'oeil effect where you couldn't really tell, because I'm using projection mapping, and some things look, it's all spatialized, you can't tell what's flat, what's depth, and then I make these patterns that are based on random glitching, not glitching. I make patterns and then I just sort of scribble all over them or disrupt them randomly by making mistakes. And I found that makes people go into a kind of trance state. That was one. And then in the past several years, the project that was shown where I was working with VR and AR, there was, I think I can show that, but also, but that's not in this group of stuff. It's on. What's wrong? Is it down? My site. I hope he's not rebuilding it. Oh, there it is. So here, I think that was the one. So this one is the flower matrix. Okay, good. So this is a space where some of those patterns I was using, it's the backgrounds there. It's an environment, and the environment uses the same kinds of patterns I was making. These are actually like QR codes. They're random arrays of points. And I made patterns out of them, and then you could see animations in them that you also see within the VR world. So you hang around in there, you hear the audio that's within there, and you see all kinds of animations that are also within the VR world. So let's see. That was that. Install. Tablets. Those are also plates. More flower matrix. That's what the world looks like. So I'm going to escape that. And go back here. So this is also that same world. It exists both as a VR experience and as a surround environment that's like a square. So you go in, instead of doing wallpaper, I make a square space. That's anamorphic projection, like it's mapped across. this one, I actually, the cellist improvises with the, within the environment. And then, I also put it in a VR world so that you can stand inside this square representation, this anamorphic, old-fashioned panoramic one, but also exist inside the VR dome, which is also something that interests me, that you confuse people spatially, and this also creates this sort of weird hyper confusion between what's real and what's fake. That's the VR space. And the headset hangs in the middle of the square projection. And when you're in there, you're the size of the dancers. And let's see another one. Related. I'm just going to show a couple of other things. Let's see. That's not me. I have no idea what this is. Okay.
I think it's going to get there. They might see much better.
Yeah, you're pretty right.
Oh, is that, what are we hearing?
Yeah.
So am I. You're always right.
I think it's that. Here's another one I did. Well, this was, these are all VR worlds. But in this, I just want to show briefly, and then I'll show a show that I'm doing that'll open in the fall, if there is a fall. Which has to do with this sort of morphing between real things and impossible things. So within this whole Alice series here, that you've now seen a few different versions of, I worked on it for about 3 years. This one, Alice Unchained, what happens in this one is I worked with the same dancer who was also in the dolls, and also with my trainer, or my former trainer, who's a wrestler, a professional wrestler. And I did a routine with him, and I motion captured him, and I motion captured her, and then I mixed their movements into one. So it was a kind of cyborg character that's half male, half female, and steps from one's body into the next, but all within the same avatar. So this is also this kind of morphing thing that I'm very interested in. You can see when it goes from girl to boy. Thing. This is made of 3 sets. There's the girl, the boy, and the boy girl. That's the girl. That's the boy. Oh, wait a minute. still the girl. Now it's good. That's the boy. That's the wrestler. That's the boy, obviously. That's the girl. And then I also have that as a VR world where I have, let's see, and then I'm almost done here, where you can you walk around in there and there's some of them are the boys and some of them are the girls. Let's see. And then some of them are mixed. Some of them are wrestlers and some of them are ballerinas. And some of them are half and half. I hope I can find it. Let's see. Ah. They're related, but they're okay. So finally, I'll show you one last thing and then we could talk again. Let's see. So this is what I'm doing in the fall. I made, going back to history, influenced by the fact that I spent so much time in the Art Institute, I decided to remake Matisse's paintings. And also dealing with this idea of things that are on the edge of perception. So there are many, many different cycles in here. They're actually so that you can't focus on any one. And again, it's one of these things that's meant to induce trance and a kind of meditative space. So here's one. And these are very gigantic and they're made from tiled monitors at the same size of the Matisse paintings, which were very big. So I'm going off the standard 16:9, which I also feel opens up your perception more because everything is a TV now. So we have different expectations from a TV perspective or aspect ratio than we do for non-TV aspect ratio, and that's also one of the things that will change because we're going to live inside mediation. I think one of the things that's already started to happen, but it was too expensive, was the idea that we would live inside mediated spaces that are not look at the object, but be in the object, and have these kind of tiled mediated spaces. we'll, the idea of the screen is we're getting, I think one of the things that's speeded up by all this is we're end of the screen period. Like the screen era is over. So these just nothing happens in them. And they're huge. And there's augmented wallpaper. And everything is moving. And the same thing happens, they sort of put you in the zone. And I'm gonna escape out of that. And in this one is a fly through of the gallery. So this is also augmented wallpaper. Here is the scale of the tiled monitors, which wouldn't have these black lines in them. There I made sculpture out of it too, using CNC and 3D printing. Where everything is activated and you're in this sort of liminal space that's functioning at the size of the real world. So, and I'll show you one last thing, which is what you see in the augmented wallpaper. So that would be, let's see, in here somewhere. Okay. Oh no, technical disc. Is that because everybody's online? So this thing of mixing the realities has just become my standard mode. And there'll be tablets that are just floating around on the tablet stands so that you don't have to explain to people. They should just do it. And so this would be a totally immersive world in which everything is at full size and everything is moving slightly and alive. And that opens in September, if there is a September. I
And
think
where is that taking place, Claudia?
that's going to be at Bitforms Gallery in New York, in the Lower. So can we talk again?
Yeah, I think we've got about 15 minutes left. If there's any additional questions, now's a great time to jump in.
I'm going to ask them questions.
Yeah, please fire away.
All right, is Graham still there? Who was the one who saw the show in Pittsburgh? Is that who is Graham? He's not there anymore?
Looks like he's still here.
Can I unmute him? No. Oh, did I just do something to him? No.
I think as the host you can.
So I would just like to hear from all of you in terms of having seen the work that you saw that I did with my students and then see my own practice, if it's surprising or it seems connected.
I see one question in the chat asking you to elaborate on what you meant that we are at the end of the screen.
Oh, well, I mean, I think the idea that we just stare at this object. I think one of the things that was already happening was screens. We have different kinds of monitor technologies, right? So giant monitors, immersive monitors, augmented glasses is the sort of norm. Like hyper mediation, hyper immersion. And I think the COVID thing speeds it up. Because the idea that people will work remotely, that education will be remote, this is going to be the new normal. There'll be it'll become very, very common. And we now have the technology for that. It was just waiting. It was very expensive as luxury items, but I think since we're going to experience a giant depression, and what probably also true is what's commonly used and needed will be things like that. And I think it was already happening. Now the prices will change. I mean, the exorbitant prices for everything, including rent, was based on a kind of inflationary, right, heated up economy, which is obviously just came to a glaring halt. And so when it's not going to go back to that. It's just how bad it'll be. So I think like what's considered normal living will be to live within immersive environments. Don't you think, Chris?
It's really hard to speculate, because I think it's kind of a double-edged thing, right? We're in this moment right now where everybody's kind of thrust into working virtually for the time being. I think there also is, well, it's interesting too, living in Detroit area, there's a really big divide in terms of who has access to the technology and an internet connection, and even a sustainable place to do all of this stuff. So, I think that's definitely been hitting home for me over the past couple of weeks is trying to advocate for students who don't have those things.
Which is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's a big divide. And so, how do we make those steps?
The part 2 of the bill, right? The bill that they just passed. Right. Part 2 is about universal internet access.
Yeah.
Fast lines for everybody.
I'm all for it.
Hyper, internet access and hardware that gives access for everyone.
Yeah.
Because that's that new bill, the part 2.
I hope it goes. I want to see if
as long as you're printing money, you might as well do it in a way that will help other people other than the rich ones.
No kidding. Dude, I want to see if there's any other students who want to respond to what they saw.
Who asked about the end of screens?
That was Sarah Paul.
Where's Sarah? Oh, I don't see her because her video is muted.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you about to say, Chris?
Oh, just to see if there's any. Sarah Paul says she's a professor at Cleveland Institute of Art.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
And I just wanted to pause and see if there's any additional questions from anybody else in response to anything that Claudia has shown.
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I was thinking a lot about how.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was thinking a lot about how this lecture, having you come out for this talk, so to speak, is just so perfectly, weirdly surreal. I really appreciate you coming out to talk to us about some of these issues and share what up until this whole thing started happening with shutdowns and all of that. I couldn't have imagined a better speaker to address some of the issues with a virtual learning environment, use of technology to try to augment the methods that we learn through. You know what I mean? Like the timing is very, very uncanny.
Well, one of the things I'd like to say is that my students all, I teach this stuff. So one of the things that was sort of great was to see, and I didn't take a break as my colleagues did, and so for 3 weeks I've been teaching full time on Zoom. And like what I found, my students seem younger than these students here, right? But they actually are so focused and it's so intense because they can't look at their phones. You are their phone. You are their monitor.
Very funny.
Yes.
Funny, but honestly, still, I prefer being in class because, no offense, I'm not a guy who's used to being heck, I'm not even an email guy much. I'm a guy who usually likes to talk up to the teacher, not someone who likes to just talk via internet.
Yeah. Who is this talking?
It is me, Brody Stark.
Oh, hi, Brody. It is sort of amazing you're different because what I found was they're more engaged.
Dude, I don't even own a Facebook account. I'm not so, and that's something my parents are telling me I should start having. But to me, I still barely am used to using my email accounts that I was happy.
Well, that's amazing for someone your age, and I applaud you for it.
Well, I'm an oddball out. I just to me never saw the point of a Facebook account.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Who is the other person?
Summer, you got questions?
No, I was gonna say I also like prefer physical teaching. Like I like the online things and I like the assignments in some of them, but I definitely prefer like being there because I feel like communication can be more natural when they're.
That is the main reason why.
What I found was that it was more intense engagement. That I'm so used to. We have classes for 14 in computer labs, which are not, well, you know them, Chris. They aren't really conducive to connecting.
That's true. Yeah, it can, and it's interesting. I think I've noticed in the different Zoom sessions that I've been in over the past few weeks, there can be a really stark divide between a session where everyone has like a really stable, fast internet connection versus when that's not the case, and it can really make a difference between being a hindrance and being, conducive to communicating and being fluid and having the same kind of responsiveness that you would have in an in-person conversation.
But it's another kind of version.
Yes.
And it is not without emotional qualities.
Absolutely.
And that's also what's interesting about it.
Absolutely.
It's not just this idea that the internet contact was cold and depersonalized.
Absolutely.
It's intense.
Absolutely. So we got, before we wrap up here, I see Summer has 2 questions. Summer, do you want to chime in?
I did have 2 questions. My first one was with how everything is going online. It kind of ties in with the arts because of like what you do, Claudia, is a lot of online viewing that people would see. Do you believe that because of how much of the online stuff there is for the art currently will draw more appreciation towards it and more recognition towards artists that do the same as you?
Yes. I mean, first of all, let me say that I don't really do stuff online, right? I mean, I'm an immersive environment person. So that's different. I mean, I can do stuff online. But I do think that we're going to experience a switchover. Like the geeks will rule everywhere.
Depends on what version of a geek are you. Techno expert or one of those geeks who just is a fan of the sci-fi or comic knowledge?
Oh yeah, but I think it's a cultural thing. Was that Brody again? Brody?
Yes.
Yes. So I think that we're talking about a culture. Yes, we are talking about a culture. You are right. It's not.
I always thought we were in a geek culture already with all the pop culture.
Right. I think I think that's a generational thing also. So I think the switch over that happened with your generation and young and older, maybe Chris's age, right, was that the issues that we're talking about became important cultural issues. So whether it's comics or movies or doesn't really matter. The problems about the sci-fi world of high technology became a dominant subject matter because the culture needed to get ready for it somehow. And then boom, this has brought it to a crisis.
Yeah.
Speed up. So summer, you know what I mean? It's like the reason I showed the 19th century, I was interested in the 19th century and because that's sort of what happened with them too. That was when Frankenstein, for example, Brody, was written. Frankenstein was about the shock they had in the 19th century.
The beginning of sci-fi.
Yes, it was the hitting of the industrial age and manufacturing and automobiles
I
and
think
movies.
Frankenstein would be considered the beginning of fantasy, horror, and sci-fi.
Yes, it was, exactly. And that was when industrialization and cinema and photography first happened. And it really shocked the hell out of people. And that was also how you got this idea of the monster, robot, half-human cyborg thing, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah. Go ahead, I'm done. Is this summer?
yes, it's summer. That actually kind of went into this next question I did have was wanting to know, like, because of everything going on and the shock factor, like you're just talking about, is with how we're all online. Do you think this is just the next step in us going to advance even more with the technology that we're continually growing?
Yeah. I think you think that too. It has to. And I also think things like this it will become part of life, that it won't happen all the time where we're all locked in our houses, but there'll be flare-ups of things like this and people will spread out more and not necessarily want to, so yeah, it'll become part of the culture that you do things like this. More. Including with education.
So
It
Claudia,
makes it a lot cheaper, by the way. No, it does. Like, I teach at a very expensive school, and I'm working with someone on developing an online program, which I think will be just as good because it's all for media, and it's about 1/4 of the price.
wow. Jason
Yeah,
Ferguson.
Jason? Yeah.
Where'd that money go? Like, if it's that much cheaper.
Well, because you're not paying for classrooms.
No, I know, but the students won't benefit. Okay? Like the prices will stay the same probably.
No, I'm talking about fees for school at about 1/4 of the price
Right.
for an MFA.
No, I understand. I'm just wondering if the students will see the benefits of that, or if administration will say, "Oh, this is a cheap way to get the same delivery, but more money."
No, how can they? It's just they're making much less money.
I think
That's
being
also because you have to provide your own equipment. There's no classrooms.
I think being at a state university, it might be a slightly different ball game where we
the
can't
math is a little bit different.
we can't necessarily have a la carte tuition as much as I wish we could sometimes.
Oh, my back.
So I think it's about time.
But wouldn't that be the same for state education? That you would have. Well, you don't pay for state education, do you?
Yes.
You do?
There's definitely tuition charges, but the tuition charge for state universities, or for Eastern, for instance, is probably somewhere between already maybe a half to a third of private art schools.
Yeah, like I would say
At least
about
at the
a
end
third.
of it.
Yeah, it's probably a third if it's like California, right? Because I know more California. So yeah, it also allows people to work, to go part-time, to do all kinds of things. So it actually opens up possibilities for people more.
Are you saying the lockdown?
I don't think there's going to be a lockdown like this, but I think culture will shift. And there will be periods of time when you have flare-ups of things and people will go in again and then come out.
I don't want to do that. I don't like being locked down so much. I feel like I'm bored in a cage. I can't see any of my friends. Don't get me wrong, I love my family, but there's a limit to how much we can enjoy time with them.
Amen, Brody.
I feel that. That's one of the funny things that was nice was all these singing videos that go viral.
So I think on that note, Claudia, I want to thank you. Brody, you have a lovely singing voice.
Better to sing than go crazy.
Absolutely. And
Maybe
thank you.
Dude, I've already been crazy for so long. This is just one way to keep other people from knowing I'm crazy.
But thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for everybody else from Bowling Green and Cleveland and everywhere else. Claudia, I'm gonna patch you in to do a studio visit with Bob, so stay on the line.
Hi, Bob.
Everybody else have an awesome night and stay safe out there.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah.
And thank
Brody, hang tough. Make some singing videos.
Yeah, I'm just gonna use this time. Yeah, I got enough. Not enough. I'm not much of a good singer. I just know how to do the low voice of it. Goodbye. When you've been part of a music family, you tend to pick up some stuff.
Claudia, are you able to switch me back to being the host?
Oh, so.
I think if you click on my video on the little ellipses.
Oh, up there on the little spots up there?
Yeah.
So, make host.
Yeah.
Oh, now I know how to do that.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to do a breakout room for you and Bob.
Have a good day.
Thanks, Brody.
Chin up.
Wait. Class over. I was saying it to Miss Hodgson.
Yes.
I thought she.
Yeah. So Brody, lab time is the rest of class for us. So just keep working on your
okay.
cycle.
I'll ask you later.
Okay. I'll stick around if you want to chat one-on-one.
Have a nice day, Miss Hart.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
Maybe I'll send you some
Thanks, Jason.
comic ideas.
Yes, send them.
I like my idea for Camelot and Northbound.
So yeah, awesome. Looks like those two got the invite. So anybody else in animation video, if you want to stick around, we can chat about your work and about what you should be plugging on.
Give me a sec. Professor, I need to take. I need to take care of some stuff.
Yeah, take a break. I'll be here till 8:20.
All right.